Well, welcome to Life After Addiction and Indictment. Today we've got a good friend of mine and a badass realtor, Jen Mascaro, and we're going to take a different approach. A lot of times, the guests I have, they're entrepreneurs, which Jen is, and she's a killer entrepreneur, but they're also people maybe that have dealt with addiction or indictment themselves. But today, Jen shared her story with me, and frankly, when I read it, I got choked up. I really didn't know the story. And she was willing to come on because I've known her long enough to know what she's made of. She's just got a heart that wants to help people and make a difference. So to be honest, she's here and she's doing this because of that. She may get mad at me for saying this, but this isn't like something she is really comfortable doing. But because she cares enough, she doesn't care about that. So Jen, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So you were married to an addict, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
I guess I should clarify. We went and got the marriage license, but we didn't go through with the wedding. But I was with him for 5.5 years. So
that's just as good. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you to tell your story, but I'm going to quickly just kind of give a little backstory on how we met and how I know you, because anybody that's out there, particularly in Utah, that ever needs help with anything from a real estate standpoint, Jen is your gal. She has her own brokerage, and when I met her, I was teaching social media stuff to real estate agents, and she just has this magnetism. I think I even told her that day, that it's not that anything's easy for her, but anything is easy for any of us when we have that positive vibe and we connect with people. And she was just someone I connected with right away and very easily. And so, if you're looking to get in real estate, if you're an investor, whatever the case may be, buying and selling, make sure to look up Jen Mascaro. We will have in the show notes, a link to her website, her social profiles as well. So that's how we met. We've stayed in touch. She's helped me here and there. I've helped her here and there. And when she found out about my podcast, we talked a little bit about podcast. And then, she talked to me about, her situation a little bit. But once again, I didn't know it until today. So Jen, I don't know what this is like for you, but it chokes me up talking about it, because you weren't just married to an addict, didn't have a happy ending. And so I'm going to ask you if you'll share your story.
So from which parts? I guess, it was 5.5 years of just
talk about
ups and downs.
Right. So give people a feel. Like my wife can obviously resonate with a lot of it because, she dealt with me for 14 years. Like, when did you know it was going on? And what are some of the things that you went through, things that you dealt with, things that you enabled maybe, or when it started, there's a lot of wreckage we create as addicts to those closest to us, and as I look back in my situation, that's the hardest thing for me to look at.
Yeah. I think that when I first met him, he was clean as far as I knew, and he hadn't been using, and I didn't know that he had a drug history. But then a few weeks into the relationship, the cat was let out of the bag that he had a history there. And as he would tell me, it was always someone else's fault, and I never caught on to that. It was always, well, there were components of a meth lab, but I was moving someone else. It was always something that had to do with someone else. I'm like, oh man, this guy's just had a rough go, and it's not his fault.
Meth his drug of choice, or did he have multiple?
Yeah. So meth was his drug of choice, and I think pot too. Even at one point he was telling me he had to do a drug test for some reason for work, and he tested positive for marijuana. And he told me that they were smoking it in the truck, and he got a secondhand high. Like, okay, I guess that could make sense.
We come up with all sorts of stuff, and he was getting away with some crazy stuff because he had a good gal that just,
Yeah, well, I've never used.
If you're never around it, exactly. Yeah. I used for a long time, and my wife had no clue.
Yep, I had no idea. I honestly thought that he had maybe bipolar issues or self-esteem issues. I had no clue that he was using. And I still had no clue he was using until it got super bad. And his mom's like, I just have this feeling that he was using. I'm like, well, why do you have that feeling? She's like, oh, about 3 months ago, I found a baggie in the garbage can. 3 months ago? Why would you wait 3 months? Because it escalates. I noticed that it starts out as it happened once to recreational to full blown, but it's a joyride, and it was a nightmare. It was awful. And I couldn't understand what was going on. I thought it was my fault. He would always make me, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to explain the manipulation there, but I did meet with one of the public defenders, and the biggest thing when he went through all this was it wasn't a lie if there were certain details left out. So if I asked him, did you steal my pen? No, I didn't steal your pen. But if I asked him, I had to be so specific. Did you take my pen that was on the counter that was blue? And he always felt like if he left out one small detail that he was being honest. And it was really rough, because you want to believe someone, you want to trust someone, you want to give them your all, especially when you make a commitment to be in a relationship with them.
Yeah.
And it really is tough. I had no clue. And I really wish I would have known and had an education about drugs, because I did. I worked at the sheriff's office. I knew what drugs were, but I didn't know what they do to you. I didn't know what type of personality. I didn't know all those different pieces, and how manipulative a person becomes to try to cover up their drug use.
Yep.
And it was tough, because he was a great person. He was a great race car driver. He was a great dad when he was clean. He was awesome. He was a great person, but the bad completely got to the point where it outweighed the good. So I could give you certain instances or certain stories. There's story after story that just like, oh my gosh, you think it belongs on a Lifetime movie. It was awful. And there were a lot of tears shed. There were times I thought, I'm never going to get out of this. This is so awful. And he wouldn't make the choice to clean up. And I had custody, or he had custody of his 2 kids, and then I had my 2 kids. So we had 4 kids living in this house, and it was just terror. It was just nonstop, just craziness. So it's a rough go. And it's not that the addict is bad. It's that the drugs completely change
the brain
them.
chemistry.
Yeah, and I wish people would understand that sometimes I feel, after watching him and living in that cloud, I always say it's a cloud, that he was self-medicating. And if he would have taken the time to go to a psychologist or go to a psychiatrist and actually deal with the problem and get on the right medication, we wouldn't have ever gone down that road. But it was a matter of pride. It was a matter of, that's not my problem. It was always something to avoid being diagnosed.
Yeah, so 100% in that denial, because as an addict, I lived it, and you nailed it, because it doesn't matter. Like when the podcast says life after addiction and indictment, I'm not talking just a opiate, drug addiction, alcoholism. It could be food, it could be sex, it could be porn. It doesn't matter. Any addiction we have as human beings is typically, almost always, covering up for something else that's going on. And I realized what mine was, and I know what my triggers were, and they had to do with relationships, and I had to deal with that stuff. But I got to where I got so sick and tired of being sick and tired, that I finally woke up, thank God, because there's a couple times I thought I was dying. And so, obviously I believe that's what was going on. But yeah, when we're in the middle of using, we can't see that. And we do not, sure as hell don't want to be told that, whether we're sober or high. Nobody likes to be told about their problems. And so until, it's like they say, until, you're willing to surrender and see it yourself, then there's nothing you, my wife, anybody else can do. We can, they can try to do interventions and things like that, but it's never going to work until we're at the point where we choose for it to work. So what are like some of the, I don't want you to go anywhere you don't want to or feel comfortable with, but like, what were some of the like really bad things that maybe you did deal with, because you're an incredibly strong woman. And you know, you when you tell me it sounds just a matter of fact, like it's easy, but I know it's not, as far as being positive and that's the only choice we have. What else choice we have? Well, we do have another choice. It's just you're very strong, and so you do focus on the positive, and that obviously I'm sure carried you through, and we will hit on that when we get, kind of down the road. So it was 5.5 years, is that right?
Yep.
And so, what did he end up doing? Any jail time as you were going
Yeah.
through the situation?
So right at the beginning, he was on probation, and I had to jump through all those hoops with him. It was always cover for me, do this, do that, help me, help me, help me. And then he was off of probation, and that's when that I sent you, when I sent you that email, I said, people think that addiction is a victimless crime and people don't need any supervision, but being on probation was the best thing that could have happened to him, because it kept him clean for his kids. It kept him clean from not having to go back to jail or wherever.
Yeah, there's accountability and consequence if you screw up.
Yeah. And so we lived in Harriman in a house, I guess, because his addictions go everywhere. So I guess there's so many stories that I could give you that are just crazy. But we were living in Harriman, and then we ended up moving to West Valley with his mom while we worked on a house to move into. It was a lease option that we were going to live in. So we lived with his mom for a little bit while we did that. But while we were in the Harriman home, he went as far as, I could tell something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was. And that's when the whole marijuana thing happened too. And he was working doing drywall. And there was a point where I was going to work every day and he wasn't going to work, and because he just felt really bad about himself, and he was using all these different excuses to not go to work when he was capable of doing everything. He was so talented. But anyway, there was one morning that I left for work, and I'm sitting at work, and I get a call from the neighbor guy, and I'm like, he's all, Jen, we need to talk about what we found in your house. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, the kids were all out at the bus stop, and then they came back into your house because it was cold, waiting, and there was pornography all over your kitchen table. I'm all, what? Are you kidding me? So I call him out on it. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about. It went as far as so he told me that the landlord planted it in the house because the landlord hated him. So then he brings over the ward missionary, and the ward missionary goes, you know what? He's your husband. You need to trust what he says. I knew the ward missionary since I was a little kid, or the landlord since I was a kid. I knew he didn't plant it there, but it was such a manipulative world. Yeah. And it's like, if I can just get her to believe this little piece, pull the wool over her eyes, we'll just get through this. Yeah. So I obviously didn't believe it. We had fights. I finally just let it die. That's one thing too that addicts will do, is they will just deny, deflect until the person asking just finally just throws their hands in the air. It's like, I can't deal with it. I'm done.
Easier to ignore it.
So from there, we moved it to his parents' house, and it was just craziness. He was saying that he was going to the RC car track to take the kids to the RC car track. Well, then my son starts telling me, well, we've been meeting this lady behind the Maverick. And I'm like, what? So me as a female, the first thing I think is, you know what? He's cheating on me. That dirty bastard is cheating on me. No, he wasn't. He was buying and selling drugs with those kids in the car. Wow. And he didn't even, and this is everything that I found out after, like later on, I had no clue any of this was happening. He was always, every time I'd say, I'm going to leave, I can't do this anymore, I'm going to leave, I don't know what's wrong with you, why are you acting like this? And I still had no idea about him using, because as far as I knew, he was clean. Yeah. And every time I'd say I was going to leave, it was always, how could you do this to my kids? And so he'd pull the kid card, he'd pull different things, and he would take like 5-HTP and tell me that he was overdosing and killing himself. And for me, I believed that. I believed that that could happen. Well, after, it couldn't happen. It would have to be like 3 bottles worth of whatever he was taking. But he had me so convinced that he was going to kill himself if I left. And so it's like, I have no other choice but to just keep plugging on. Like, you get pulled right into that world, and it's so hard to get out of. But some of the things um, that when it started to downfall and he started to use a bunch, and I had no idea, was, as I told you in the email today, I was sitting at Black Angus and Sandy in a meeting, and we lived out off of 47th South and 3600 West, and I'm clear in Sandy. He calls me, he's like, you need to come home. I'm like, I'm right in the middle of a meeting. It was right about this time we were doing a Christmas lunch for my agents. I'm right in the middle of a meeting. As soon as I'm done, I'll head home. No, you need to come now. I'm like, I can't come now. I'm doing this event for my agents. You're more than welcome to come here. He's like, never mind, shoots a gun, and the phone hangs up. And I am sitting in the middle of a restaurant, and I'm like, I gotta go. I've raced home. I'm bawling. I'm crying. I don't know what's going on. And I call his mom. She's at work. She can't leave, and she's crying. I get to my house, and I walk into the house, and he's laying in the tub with his arms like this, like he's in a casket or something. There's a picture of him and I on the floor next to the tub. There's a huge hole in the ceiling of my bathroom from him shooting a shotgun in the house. And he looks at me and he goes, do you think we could have poker tonight at the house?
Holy.
And I just started bawling. I was just shaking. I'm starting to shake now. A lot of this is like PTSD crap. So if I cry, I'm sorry. And so, but anyway, it was like nothing even happened. It was the hardest world to live in. There were times toward the end where he took a golf club to all my things in the house because he was upset with me, because I busted him with, he had a girlfriend, I found out later on, and I busted him with her. And I guess they'd had a fake ID made with my information and her picture to go into the bank to steal everything out of my checking account.
Wow.
And luckily the girl who worked at the bank knew me, and she's like, Jen, this is what's going on. So luckily I had a relationship with the bank manager, and she called it out. But I mean, there were times that he'd call me up. I kicked him out, and I said, you can't live here. And he's like, that's fine. You're a bitch. You're F&C. You're this, you're that. Okay. So I just told him, you need to go if you're not going to go to rehab. And I tried so hard. I'm like, hey, let's take you to rehab. Let's go to rehab. And we did. We got all the way, can't remember the name of the place, but it's over by where Sportsman's is. There's a rehab center back in there. And we went into intake, and they called him in. He went in, and he was in there for like 45 minutes. They called me back, and they said, the lady tells him, go ahead and tell her what we've discussed. And he goes, well, I think I just need some outpatient. I'll be fine. I'll do some AA, not a big deal. And I looked at her and I said, well, what do you recommend? She goes, he is bipolar schizophrenic. He needs 30 days of detox. He needs to be here. He needs to be on a treatment plan, and we need to get him cleaned up and get him on the right medication. And we want him here 30 days in house. And, basically this is what it looks like. And I'm like, okay, how much is it going to be? She's like, $15,000. I said, great. We have some equity in a cabin that we have. I'll just take the home equity loan and we'll pay for rehab. And he's like, no, let's just go talk to my mom. Let's go talk to my mom. And a lot of it is parents need to understand they can't enable their children.
Big time.
They can't. So we go to the Panda Express over in West Valley.
Yep.
And we're sitting there, and he's like, I just don't want to go to rehab. I have to be there for my kids for when they get out of school, because Jen works so much. I've got to be there. And so I'm going to do some AA. And I'm like, no, he has to go to rehab. He has to. And she goes, you're just trying to divorce him. You're just trying to get him out of your life to divorce him. Like, a divorce is $350.
Yeah.
Rehab's $15,000. You can't say, like, you know what I mean? I'm trying to get him out of my life.
There's a point where parents don't, they don't even understand that they're actually in denial, because I don't want to pick on our community here in Utah, but I believe particularly in the Mormon community, we don't like to admit our kid has a problem. And so there's a lot of that, but I think there's also a lot of anybody's parent not wanting to admit their kid has a problem because they're internalizing it almost as like I didn't do the right job if that's what's going on. But that has nothing to do with it a lot of times. I mean, certainly sometimes it does. That could be the pain that's causing the trigger to go down the path they go down, to numb things out, because that's what drugs is doing. It's just numbing us from reality, to
It's
cope.
so true.
And so, yeah, so obviously they're blaming you, and now you're feeling like sounds like you're at the point where you're probably catching on enough to realize that no, that you know what's going on, but you probably still don't have the experience to really know, other than, yeah, you've been through hell now for a while and you're starting to see patterns. But like when I was an addict, I'd drive to work some days just bawling, because I didn't know how to get out, but I wanted out. I was so sick of it. And I assume that you were probably in a similar situation where you're just like, I believe rehab's the answer. But then, when you've got two forces fighting against you, the one's an ultimate manipulator at this point, and truly deep down, even as, his girlfriend, wife, significant other, it's best, but at the same time, you don't want to be, it's just a tough balancing act. And so, like I say, as a parent, when does that tough love come in? I mean, I've dealt with things in my life. My kids, thank the good Lord, haven't had any of the problems I have. And maybe that's why I had them. And if that's the case, I'll own them and always do them. But they still fight other things in life, and we do certain things that normally wouldn't do just because of experiences we had. But as a parent, I know there's times where I need to set boundaries or to have that tougher love come up. But shit, that's hard as hell, man.
Yeah, it's so true.
And as a spouse,
And
it's the same thing. It's no
so
different.
true. Yeah, it was hard. And his mom is such a great lady. When I guess to speed it up a little bit, he committed suicide while he was in jail. But his mom was always enabling it. And I don't think that it's because she was bad. She saw the good in her son. She really did. And she but she kept bailing him out. She's like, well, we're leaving to go racing and we're not taking him with us. And I feel so bad. So he had stolen a Cadillac, had cocaine or some, I don't know all the details, when he was like 14 or 15 years old. And he was taken to DT. And she went and got him out to take him racing. It's like, no, you got to leave him there. You've got to let this soak in. So there was never any, he would just call crying to get out of jail. And I think he would just manipulate her to the point that she would just cave and say, I've got to get him out. And she just didn't understand. And it got to the point where he ended up with a federal charge and because of guns. And they begged me to come to court. They're like, you need to write a letter saying they need to let him out. And I'm like, no, I can't. And finally, the prosecutor looked at me and she goes, if you don't stop enabling this, you are going to end up dead and he will too. He will kill you and he will kill himself, because he had threatened it a lot. If I can't have you, no one will have you. And it was bad. He had tried to run me off the road into a lake. He had shot a shotgun at me and he barely missed. He like swung the shotgun and he shot right next to the garage door as I was running in from the garage to the house. And he shot right next to me. I called his mom. I'm like, your son just tried to shoot me. And bless her heart, like I have no ill will against her. She really did the best she could with what she had to work with. But she came over and started cleaning up the BBs from the shotgun shell, trying to hide it from the cops. I'm like, I am going to call the cops. I can't do this anymore. And so it was tough. I never called the cops though. Isn't that really sad? I never called the cops with that. Finally
there was other factors now too kicked in, I think, with the mother,
Yeah. So what finally got him was I just was so frustrated, and he's like, you need to give me my guns. You bitch, you need to meet me in the bank parking lot. You need to give me my guns. I'm like, I'm not going to give you guns. I'm not giving them to you. I will kill you. I will kill the kids. I'll do this. I'll do that. He actually like tracked me down in my Tahoe by calling OnStar, saying that he couldn't find my vehicle. He tracked me down, like ran me off the road into a tire store parking lot and wouldn't let me leave until I agreed to turn his cell phone back on, give him cash and give him his guns. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. So working at the sheriff's office, I had some friends that worked there. I called one of my friends and I'm like, hey, can you help me talk him into going into rehab? Can you help me just do this? Let's get him into rehab. He's really a good person. And they're like, yeah. So I had a cop there waiting with me. And I'm like, yep, come get your guns. And he went to come over and he's like, there's cops. And I'm like, no, there's not. You need to come over. He's like, I know there's cops. Well, he was high as a kite, I guess. He fled from the cops. It was a high-speed chase. They didn't find him. I finally got him to talk. I talked him to turning himself in because of his high-speed chase. If he wouldn't have had the high-speed chase, he wouldn't have ever gone to jail. But then come to find out, he told me that he had like a half a pound of meth on him. And that's how that all went down. But it was my fault. It was still, he's in jail. It's my fault because he fled from the cops. It was never any accountability. And I just wanted to help him. And now like when I talk about this, I'm like, how did I let myself live in this world? And a lot of people who are in relationships with addicts ask themselves that after they step out. They're like, how did I suck into that? Why did I do that?
Yeah,
and you can't explain it.
Yeah.
I still to this day cannot explain it. Did I love him? There was parts of him I loved. Could he be a good person? Yes, but the bad far outweighed the good at many points throughout the relationship, but I still stayed because of kids, because of guilt, because I didn't want him to kill himself. Like it was the most toxic environment that I could have ever have been in. And he was in jail on charges when he hung himself. He wasn't there convicted. He hadn't even had his court trial yet, but his aunt had died. It was on 8/8 of 2008. His aunt had passed away and he wanted to get out of jail. He's like, you need to get somebody. So he kept calling me collect. And I'm like, he's like, you need to get me out. I need to go be with my mom. I'm like, your mom is just fine. And at this point, he and I were not together. I said, I love you and I care about you as a friend, but I could never be with you again because I can't do that to myself and I can never do that to my kids. But he'd call me, I'd be cordial to him just because I don't know, because you do love someone. You do care about them. You don't want the worst for them. And he called me and he's like, Jennifer, I just want you to know I love you. And I'm like, well, I love you too. He's like, don't you ever forget about it. I love you. I'm like, okay, love you too. And he was already, because he caused so much drama in in Davis County, because he was held on federal charges. He was in solitary. Wow, yeah. So to get out of there and to go, he had taken his sheets, and I honestly believe what he was trying to do, because he had attempted suicide so many times in that 5.5 years, and not attempted. Right. It was never an attempt. It was always the staged suicide to get my attention, because he knew that would get me. Yeah. But I think that he had tied the sheets around his neck with the intent of them finding him by the time they picked up his lunch tray or his dinner tray, and they picked up his dinner tray later than what he thought. And so he ended up actually hanging himself. So that's what I believe happened. I don't know, but that to me, it sounds more like what would happen than not. So he passed away. His parents didn't even say anything. When I got the call that he had killed himself, one of my good friends had called me. I was at the GNC. It was a Sunday morning. He's like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I hadn't heard from him for a couple of days. He hadn't called me collect. I'm like, okay, must have got in trouble again or whatever. And he's like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, James is dead. I'm like, what? And he had hung himself. They resuscitated him, brought him back, life flighted him to University of Utah Hospital. And he was there on life support, and his parents took him off life support before my kids or myself could go and even say goodbye. Oh. And so when I showed up to the University of Utah, I'm like, the first thing the lady out of the grief counselor's mouth was, please don't sue us. We're funded by the state. Please don't sue us. And I didn't. Yeah. But I could have, because I was listed as next of kin, all of those other good things. So. Well, and possibly the jail. But I mean, that, once again, that goes along to the type of character you have, Most people don't care. They're just going to take that and look at it as an opportunity. And, that says a lot about who you are.
and obviously what makes people, attracted to you because of the type of person you are. So, one of the things that, you know, I try to talk about and help others see is like, okay, when you face so much adversity, we all have different adversity in our lives, but when you've been through something so difficult and stuff, you know, you're what, roughly 12 years from that time ballpark.
Yeah.
And so you've obviously been doing very well and in your own business and things like that. I kind of have an idea of kind of how you dealt with it, what you've told me, but that's what really was my struggle and what a lot of people's struggle is, you know, you a lot of times, I guess I'll say it because I was there. You you shift and sit in a victim role, you know, rather than just picking yourself back up. I mean, obviously I picked myself back up or I wouldn't be here, but there was a lot of wasted time. And, what do you think other than, I know we all have, we're made up of who we are, but we also, you know, improvement and growth and all that stuff comes from the toughest times, I believe, but it also comes from us choosing to work on us from the inside out. Like, so what are some of the things, maybe, if you have them, or what do you attribute your attitude, I guess is really what it comes down to. You choose to always have a positive attitude, or, to create that positive energy. And with what you've been through, that's pretty difficult.
Yeah. I, you know, it was such a learning experience for me. And it was, it's so tough to see everything that I went through. I did bury myself in work, and I gained a ton of weight. I started just, after that happened, I had a huge addiction to food to try to bury it, just bury it, just bury it. And it's taken a long time to recognize, hey, you know what? This is what it is.
Yeah.
This is why you're doing this to yourself. Why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you carrying this guilt? And so I'd have to say my positive attitude comes from the fact that I'm still alive, that
Yeah.
my kids are still alive, that they got bits and pieces of it. It's unfortunate and it's sad that they have to live a life without him, because his kids, their mom has gone to federal prison. She was a drug addict also. And so, I look at it as, I'm grateful that I have never had to struggle with addiction, because my heart breaks for people who have to struggle. I should say with that type of addiction.
Sure.
So my addiction was definitely food, but when it comes to pills and comes to mind altering things, it's tough. And I could not even imagine the struggles that someone else had to go through. And a lot of people too, part of what's gotten me through it too, is I've had to wake up and realize that he had demons bigger than anyone could conquer, and he wouldn't let anyone conquer those demons with him or help him conquer them. And if there's one thing an addict needs to know, is that you need to have help conquering those demons.
Period.
And suicide is not the answer. It is not okay. It is not fair. It leaves so many victims that your family wants you here, as regardless if you're using or not. They love you. They want to help you. They don't want to make your life miserable. They just are tapped out. They have no answers. Like,
Exactly.
you go through so much hell, enabling and enabling and enabling, and it finally just breaks you. And finally you're like, you know what? Peace out. I'm done. I can't deal with it anymore. I can't help you. You won't let me help you. And then they start getting I guess basically feedback from outside sources. Let them hit rock bottom, kick them out, do this, do that. I mean, you are torn in so many different directions when you are dealing with the addiction of a loved one. It's
Love,
rough.
I mean,
It's
love
tough.
is a tight bond.
Yeah, it is.
That's really what it is that allows people to continue to go through what you went through. My wife, my parents, all the people that were hurting, and it hurts those we love the most, but we don't even see it, and it's really a crazy thing. And
Yeah, because at the time that you're hurting them, they're the asshole, because they're not letting you do your thing. And
exactly.
it sucks, because they don't want to be the asshole. They want to fix you. And
Yeah.
if you don't want to be fixed, there's just no fixing you. Just there's
So
not.
when you're using and your mind's altered, your brain chemistry changes. I mean, I can attest to that 100% for those of you that have seen or know of the movie 28 Days, when that fog lifts, it truly lifts at 28 days. And I'll talk about that story on another podcast because I wouldn't be married if that hadn't happened.
But it's crazy because the fog lifts for you and the fog lifts for your significant other. So your wife is a very strong person for choosing to stay in it, because as that fog starts to lift, they look back and they're like, what in the heck just happened? Why am I putting up with this? And they have the choice to either be all in or bail at that point. And it's a rough go. It really is.
When that happened for me, we were actually separated for the third time in 18 months. And, you know, I joke about the attorney I had. I knew for a long time he was a customer at the car wash at my dad's. I ran, and I, you know, joke about it now that, like, if Rick, if you'd have been on top of things and doing business the way you should, I'd have been divorced. Yeah. But I also believe everything happens for a reason, you know, and so it's a tough deal. But, you know, as an addict, doesn't matter addiction, like Jen said, you know, you need help. Well, we have the brain chemistry altered, and then we also have our egos still, and that's a huge combination. It's brutal. But for those that are maybe still struggling with it, or if you're a loved one that has someone struggling, just try to recommend and suggest even a community. And it's a lot easier these days than when I went through it back in 2000. Is there's some great groups on Facebook and stuff, you know, and you can still there's some cool stuff out there. And most people in this world, I believe, have great hearts. You know, bad things happen to good people. Good people make poor choices. That doesn't mean they're bad. And even if, as an addict, I know I would have felt guilty or maybe been hesitant to go into some group, but they don't know if you're using or not. But the point is, you can see the true friendships being created. You can see people will, like, I'm pretty prideful still, even after what I've been through. And the only example I can use is, just for example, if I'm at work and, you know, I'm busy, but not like where I couldn't take a break if I didn't want to, right? But say my kid called and needed something, I might respond like I'm irritated, like they're bothering me, right?
Yeah.
But my wife's a nurse. She went through Dayspring with me. She understands addiction now. But so when she's at her doctor's office, if somebody comes in, a family member, and they've got someone that's in trouble or that needs to talk to somebody, an addict, you know, they call me. Why is it that I will not even think twice? I'll drop everything I'm doing. I'll go I about said waste, but it's not a waste, or I wouldn't do it. I'd spend the rest of the day if that's what it took, you know? And that's the way most people are going to be, because that's the kind of thing that, number one, fulfills me, but it also is a way to always be able to give back to help me remember where I was and that I don't want to go back there, you know?
It's so true. And it's, I don't know, just stopping in an AA meeting, knowing that every one of us on the face of this earth have an addiction. I don't care what anyone says. Everyone has an addiction. Everyone has a vice. Yep. There's Diet Coke. I love chocolate donuts. I haven't had one forever. And Mountain Dew, it took me forever to give it up. Their addiction comes in so many forms. And so no one person on this earth is better than the other. They really aren't. And it's just unfortunate that we're not here to help each other, that it's, you know, and that when you as an addict or you're in that position, you want help so bad. And I don't know if it's not at the high, but as you're coming down, that's when his biggest things were. It was once he got his fix and he was good to go. He was good until he was coming down. Yep. And it's just tough. So it's like the one thing for it, if I could give any addict that has a family, and everybody has a family, piece of advice is go spend some time with your kid. Go spend some time with your wife. You need a fix. Yeah. Fix it that way. Seriously, that's and if that relationship's so toxic, because sometimes addicts are in relationships with someone just as toxic that feed that want for the drugs. Yeah. And so if that person's that, then find the person that is your fix. Somebody, whether it's church, whether it's an AA meeting, there's so many ways, whether it's charity. Seriously, that's one way that I think is awesome for anyone who's an addict, anyone who, just any person in general, the whole entire world. donate your time. There is no better high than donating your time and
Yeah.
watching the reward of just being there and helping someone through something. So the minute you go to use, try to find something else to do, whether it's, there's so many cool charity groups out there right now that
Yep.
if you call them up, hey, do you have a family in need? Yeah, I have a lady who is bedridden who needs her yard cleaned up.
Yeah.
Just those little things. That appreciation is such an awesome fix. But the other thing is get medical help or get psychological help, because it doesn't make you a bad person if you're bipolar. It doesn't make you a bad person if you're schizophrenic. It
Right.
is what it is. You can't change it, but you can take the medication that can help you from using and ruining your whole life. It's just,
Think of it this way. I can't remember who told me this, but I know my dad used to say it, and I don't know where he heard it. But why is it that we'll consistently take our cars in for oil change and quote checkups, but we as human beings will never go get a checkup from the neck up, right?
yeah,
Like
that's
our
true.
pride, it's because we have beliefs around it that aren't even real, that like we're weak or something like that. It has nothing to do with it. The stronger people, are the ones that actually will go for it.
It's
And
true. And you look at it, look at all of these like star athletes, and they all have a coach.
amen.
So if
Yep.
you take addiction and look at it as, I need my coach,
Yep.
as your psychologist is your coach, or you have a sponsor who's your coach.
Yep.
Somebody
Look at it.
have a coach, because the best of the best have coaches, and you deserve a coach too.
Right.
That's just how it is.
Well, that's awesome, Jen. That's actually a great place to end. The last thing I wanted to say is like the thing that I heard you say that really resonated with me, that really made an impact, that also ties to things you were talking about at the end, is, you looked at the things you still had to be grateful for. It's like when we're grateful as human beings, like if you're doing service, I think it has the same effect on us as gratitude. When you're grateful for something, you are focused on someone else through that gratitude or whatever. You can't be angry, pissed off, whatever. You can't have all those other emotions, depressed or any of that, because you're getting out of yourself and putting it on someone else. And that's truly what always has filled my bank the most my whole life, when I'm able to give. It doesn't matter what type of giving, time, service, whatever, money when you can, whatever, but something where it makes a difference in somebody else's life. So
It's so true. And if anyone needs to find a charity that they would love to support, like we have Utah Motorsports Foundation, we have Children in the Earth, there's so many different charities that I'm associated with. So if people are wondering what charity can they contribute to, have them email me. They can email me through my website for my company,
what's
and
your company's domain? I'll have it on the show notes, but what is your company's domain?
It's just mascarogroup.com. So, okay. And it's
MASCARO group.
Group.com. Yeah. Okay. And so we'll find a charity for them. I know people who are sponsors for people who are clean. And if it's finding somebody to support you, or you just need someone to talk, and if you are I hate to use the word victim, but if you're the victim of an addict, or if you're the support person of an addict, reach out to me. If I can't be there, I have lots of friends that have gone through little pieces of it, and I'm very, very private about it. A lot of people don't know what I've been through, because I just feel like it's not where I want to focus.
Yeah.
If I focused on that, then what does my life look like? If I focus on being the victim of that, but if I look at everything awesome that I have in my world, and look at all of the good things that are there, waking up each morning, like having just, I don't know, life is good. It could be so much worse.
Amen. That's one. I'll end on this. Is when I was in prison, I had a lady who knew my parents. I had never met her. She started sending me letters about my 3rd month in. She sent them a couple of times a month, sent me a lot of books. And the second letter she sent me, she said, Steve, like, I can't even talk about this without getting choked up probably. But she said, I don't know what it's like in there, and I hopefully never will. But if you can go to bed every night and focus on 3 things you were grateful for that day, I promise you it will make a difference. This was about 2.5 months in. I was still depressed as hell. And that's what shifted everything for me. So it doesn't matter how bad you have it, somebody has it worse. And if you can look at that, it will help you tenfold. But Jen, you're a rock star. Appreciate your time. And you can reach out to Jen through her website, mascarogroup.com. You can also, you can probably find her on Facebook and shoot her a message if you wanted to chat. But I know she's a person of her word. And same goes here. She said, if you're on the victim side where you're, married to, or brother, sister, doesn't matter, son, daughter of dealing with addiction, reach out to her. People that have been through it. There's a lot of those people out there. It goes on my side. If you're, addicted and struggling, reach out to me. I'm happy to help. So just want to wish you freaking Merry Christmas, Jen, and look forward to staying in touch. If I can do anything for you, you know where to find me.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks so much.
Okay, have a good night.
Hey, you too. We'll see you.
Take care.